Brilliant. Well, it's lovely to meet you all. I understand that you are sitting in lots of different parts of the world right now. I was reflecting on our conversations together with regards to this institute, and what I found fascinating is, what is it about risk? Why do we always talk about downside risk management and not also upside risk management as well? And that's how we started having our conversations together. And I presented my journey, if you will, over the last 6.5 years with what is called Metlen Energy Metals. And we had a first capital markets day at the London Stock Exchange this week. In 6.5 years, I've witnessed the stock going from €6 to €44. So we're getting into a 6 billion market capitalization, and we are in the process of launching we have already launched. We're not in the process. We're in the process of concluding the launch of our relisting into the FTSE 100. And I guess the important thing to discuss here is key factors from a director's perspective, whether non-exec or exec for that matter as well. What are the key perspectives here that can be cross-learnings across the geographies that we're all sitting in? And the first thing that has to struck my mind is board leadership. So the way we discuss board leadership, I mean, there's so much that's been written out there. But the key question here is, how relevant is the board and how impactful is the board? We have processes out there. We have so many good practices about composition. We have all these conversations that we've been having for a long time now. But the question is, once you bring all these people in, how do you synthesize that skill set in a way that actually reflects where the business is going to be in a few years' time? And in his wisdom, I guess, in his foresight, and as a board move at the time in 2018, the chairman / CEO / main shareholder curated a board that had great skills diversity. It had geographical diversity to some extent, and it had age diversity. And that was quite a critical element in all this, in that it started sparking conversations about what is green in 2018, mind you. Now, what is green today is a completely different story, but we'll get into that. But what was green back in 2018-19 in a European environment where you actually have carbon credits. You have to buy your carbon credits. So there is an internal price for carbon. You are charged for what you emit. And the interesting thing about that conversation was that in that process of that curated skill sets and the age range, if you will, we managed to have some very strong conversations and very constructive conversations about what good looks like for green. What is green here? Is green a flavor, or is green a new reality? And on the back of a series of conversations, obviously, and a series of inputs, what we really embarked on back then was a strong rechanneling of our strategy towards always a commercial strategy that is much more mindful of the times, which times were green times. Fast forward 6.5 years now, we're talking about a portfolio that goes in the multi-gigawatts. It is in 42 countries. We have a very strong green premium in our stock price, in that stock price appreciation. And we have the ability to talk about energy security and a very synergistic model that can benefit from the cheap energy that is produced by renewables, but also have the benefit of transition, what we call transition commodities, which is gas, and therefore address the base load in our market, but also the peak elements in that energy production market. So what was originally a regulatory input for us, where we had to get charged for our carbon credits, turned into a strategy altogether with distinct commercial opportunities, and has managed to create a very synergistic model of green, transition green, highly efficient, excellent resource utilization, and very tight cost control. So we're in the bottom quartile in terms of, or rather the top quartile in terms of cost control. These conversations would not have happened unless the board was involved, unless the board was relevant, and that unless the board would put a hand up and speak in a way that presents different situations, but also tries to synthesize a context that is coherent and a context that is synergistic. How did we do that? Because we had that, for European settings, a peculiarity of having the chair and the CEO founder in one person, we put a lot of substance behind our lead independent director. Now, the lead independent director happened to be someone who has immense experience in logistics, in green, in building businesses around the world. And the first investments that he helped us made was to bring up the board to speed about how we best work together, what we're solving up for in the different committees, and how we integrate most in the business, speaking to different departments, having deep dives with different departments in a way that conversations then would be absolutely strategic and relevant, and everyone would chip in their own skill set in a way that something would be synthesized out of it in the end. That took form of numerous non-executive sessions, net exchanges, recently with other companies where we've seen best practices come in and talk to us, obviously, to the extent possible about what works, what doesn't work for them. Offsites and absolutely site visits. No way that you can have a conversation on the board unless you've actually been to see what we're talking about, what the logistics look like, what do people look like on the ground. So that was what really turned what was a risk at the time, which was the tariffs, into a completely strategic opportunity that took us into the IRA of Canada. And now we have a big fleet in Canada that we are developing on the renewable side. Walking about the organization, getting a sense of how your senior management feels, how one level down feels, so that you know what the internal pressure points are and how to manage to synthesize into a coherent picture that was forming. That was equally important as well. And that helped in a way to cross-check and feed in information where everyone was running on a very high speed to get things done, to synthesize a picture in a way that could actually lead to excellence in execution and excellence in monitoring. In fact, preventative work rather than monitoring exposed. If I could summarize the second thing that was key for us was talent, evaluation, succession, and really the creation of a proper talent management endeavor in the organization. So you have a dominant person, like you have in quite a few organizations, in fact, that has a very clear vision of things. The question is, how do you actually manage to perform the first evaluation of a chair like that, and to highlight key important points that are actually working very, very well, and also areas of opportunity that would help, again, in that context of consistency, that will help to deliver the strategic plan and the vision of that chairman. There is no way you can do that unless you hire a strategic chief people officer, a chief talent officer. There is no way that you can do that unless you convert your nominations committee into a proper talent committee. There is no way that you can do that unless the strategic talent director actually is very, very close to the board. What are the internal dynamics? How do you build leadership? How do you cascade leadership in the organization? What are the key issues that are affecting the top, the medium, and the bottom? What do we mean when we're talking about managing people in 42 countries? How do you make sure that the vision actually translates all the way to Chile or to Australia? How do you make sure that you have processes that are not, these legalese type of policies, but actually routes to outcomes, consistent outcomes, which is what can happen only through talent and governance, the combination of. And these are the type of things that we worked very closely with. So we did promote a culture, if you will, of evaluation, a culture of, we promoted it even further, that culture of discipline, whereby we would promote people from within, make sure that we promoted a lot of people from within, but also get critical talent externally to make sure that we would cross-pollinate new ideas, replenish skill sets that were relevant for the future, and also integrate, so that what was a central function would actually disseminate into the two business lines that are energy and metals. There is no way you can have a remuneration, a talent conversation, unless you have a remuneration conversation. So the key aspect of the remuneration conversation was to make sure that the remuneration policy would be a short form summary of the company's strategy. So when you guys would walk in and you saw a remuneration policy, you would say, I know where these guys are getting at. Unless you have that, whatever you put in place as a board, unless there is some impact on the ground, it's not going to happen. Unless you have the ability to influence 3, 4, 5 lines below the senior management that you're speaking to, there is no way that you can have real impact in the organization. Because of our model, and a very carefully chosen synergistic model that leans on opportunities, it was very difficult for us to seek, and it still is very difficult for us to seek comparables. One of the most interesting things that I've seen in my non-executive career and through all the policy work that I've been doing is that we directors tend to throw a lot into comparables to say, oh, these guys are doing it, therefore it must be relevant for us. That is useful on some occasions, but you need to be able to build on it. And you need to build on it in a way that is absolutely relevant for the organization here. Unless you can understand your differentiating points, but also take the best of the companies out there, your strategy is more likely to become a downward risk management strategy than an upward risk capture strategy. And with the work that we've done on the evaluation and the talent and the board's upgrades that we've done and all the efforts that we've made, we've managed to keep that entrepreneurial spirit in the organization and put structure and discipline around it. Now, there is no way, as a third pillar, if you will, there's no way that we could talk about governance unless we were talking about the internal control environment. Now, the internal control environment in probably up until 2018 was something, 2021 was something that was frequently talked about. Now it's absolutely an imperative. Why? Because when things are so messy, is probably the right word. When things are so messy in your external environment, you'd better be able to control what you can control in your internal environment and steer it in a way that actually fulfills your immediate plans and effectively your vision as the world responds around you. So in this context, what the main efforts that we've tried to make have been efforts of an integrated, an approach of integrated assurance. And what I mean by integrated assurance is, how do you ignite an internal audit division that doesn't spot things, but actually deep dives into the most financially / operationally material elements, brings them to the fore, and combines them with a risk management division that looks at the bottom as well, and looks all around the different parts of the organization, and then combine them with a compliance function that doesn't just spit out statistics, but spits out financial materiality, operational materiality. So What you have in contrast, as a base case, if you will, in many occasions, is that you have a risk register at the board level that is at best semi-static, and then you have some mitigating factors that will help to move things along and somehow create some credence for the board. What we've tried to do here is it's quite the opposite way. Do a risk register that is actually utilized by the organization. It's not for the purpose of the board, it's for the purpose of the company itself. And all these mitigants are actually not reactive processes, if you will, but responses to what are changing world environments that can lead you potentially to your next strategic level. What I mean by that is seeing, for instance, that the world is changing. We're talking about not a peace world, but a post-peace world. We've embarked over the last few years, after quite a fair amount of research and development, we've embarked on the recovery of critical raw materials like gallium, like other raw materials from processing of tailings, which again is in the context of circularity, in the context of environmental preservation, that can be used for screens and can supply a large chunk, if not the largest chunk, of gallium demand in Europe, and therefore insulate Europe of any tariff retaliations or any tariff escalations in wars. Second element, in our aluminium supply chain, in our applications division, we have always been working on a defense division. Now, this defense division is planning to go 5 times bigger. Why? Because it's an expertise that we've been developing for the longest time. It's a know-how that we've been developing for the longest time, but always integrating back into what is a very deep understanding of the aluminium supply chain. So in other companies' risk register, war is an entry. Because we were thinking preemptively and not even reacting, but actually thinking preemptively, what was an entry in our risk register now has become a strategic direction in the organization. So I don't want to speak much more because I think I will be diluting the key messages here, but fundamentally you need to have a board that can participate. If the board cannot participate and deliver impact, it's very difficult for any changes to have real legs in the organization. Unless you have, number two, unless you have proper talent development and a talent approach in the organization where you build things up from the bottom and the top with evaluations, with transparency, with structures, it will, again, and with proper motivation, again, it will be very difficult for the bulk of the organization to deliver the strategy that you're inviting at the top. And finally, unless you have an integrated understanding of your internal assurance that actually not just registers things, but processes things and integrates things top to bottom, and then signals new strategic directions, then how are you going to determine value creation? How are you going to produce value creation in what is now, in fact, fascinating times? In my last board meeting, and I'm not going to share anything confidential here, but I went in there quite alarmed, and I said, listen, I mean, this world order is, I mean, it's nothing like probably my parents have lived, not myself. And I was startled by the chair's response, because he was not willing to entertain that negativity. And simply, what he was trying to say is that I'm sitting, I'm careful, I'm patient, and I'm ready. And that triggered to me exactly that thought process that kind of circled back the whole thought process of building that governance. It's all about what is the next opportunity that comes out. as a result of a solid hold and ownership mentality, first of all, a solid hold of what it is you are doing as a company, as an enterprise, and then how do you have the right resources, whether it's financial or non-financial, your human capital resources, your know-how, in order to actually go for the next opportunities and stick with that leadership. So with that, that's all I have to say.